Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the propaganda around and the way the term has been completely bastardized, which is decolonisation. Now, I noticed it's being used in the case of say this conflict in the Middle East at the moment. You know, we're fighting back against, we're going to decolonize and this sort of thing. So it's decolonisation has become a synonym for well, I don't know, you know, sort of supposed oppressions against marginalised peoples or something. So if there's any argument about should 12-year-olds be allowed to choose their gender, then we're trying to decolonize. And then, so it's a term that's being thrown around everywhere, and I don't know if anyone really knows what it means anymore. But trying to sort of, if you like, tease out some of the core meanings. The globalists are using, and the globalist funded organisations who are the loudest, who are the loudest, screaming the loudest about decolonisation, you know, getting their marching orders in the World Economic Forum and the United Nations and the George Soros NGOs, that sort of thing. They're the ones that are screaming the loudest about this decolonisation, and it seems to have two purposes for them, at least, is to shame, blame, and guilt and de-legitimize. To de-legitimize white societies. You've achieved nothing, you white society. You may be the richest, but you've achieved nothing because you stole it from everybody else, and whatever you didn't steal is covered in blame and shame and moral repugnance. So your white societies, rich societies, white Western societies are totally delegitimized by this these claims. Now, it's all nonsense and propaganda, but who cares? It sounds good, particularly to the feckless youth and again the propagandists. So that's one use of this decolonisation. The other thing is, well, because you white people did so many bad things to all the brown and black peoples of the world, it's only fair. It's only fair and reasonable that they should now come to the white West, and they should come in massive schemes of people relocation from the dirt poor basket case countries that are only dirt poor because of the fucking white Nazis that took everything, and they should now come back to the brown and black folk should be relocated into the West to take back what was really theirs, what was stolen from them by the fucking white Nazis. So that's the sort of the overall argument. So that's why the globalists cling to this decolonisation thing. No, I've done a few videos in the past about, you know, was colonisation good or bad, or how should you measure good or bad? Was it helpful or useful? I think that if you look at colonisation where sort of two white people, for example, two white peoples colonise each other, or two brown peoples, or peoples of very similar, you know, like the North American Indians, where they would wipe out a neighbouring tribe and take over its territory. That's not seen as colonisation because you don't have one tribe being technically superior, or, you know, particularly to the other tribe, and they're pretty similar in you know every sort of way. They just they might have some tribal sort of views on things, but if they kill off each other or one kills off the other, then that's not seen as colonisation. Whereas it meets all the key definitions of it. But where white people do it, that's today viewed as, by the activists and the globalists, again, the globalist funded activists, is now seen as a sign of, or an indication of the most monstrous evil, purely because the people tend to be white, or the people are white and more technically advanced. So I don't know how that works out as, you know, looking in Australia, the Australian Aborigines were, in terms of human development, they were, you know, 10,000 plus years behind where the Europeans were when the Europeans arrived. So this is in technological terms, but also organisational. And once you start bringing people together in cities or larger towns, this sort of thing, then you need systems and procedures and organisational structures to support that, which include things like courts and the magistrates, codified laws, and these have to be perceived as being independent. Otherwise, people won't surrender their own authority to sort things out. They'll only surrender it to a third party if that third party can be seen to be utterly impartial and so on. So there's various organisational and structural things that advanced societies bring with them, not simply technological. They also bring in terms of the internals of the state, at least a lot more peaceful coexistence or peaceful conduct of commerce and that sort of thing. If you look at an example, when the British sort of became masters in India, the amount of Indian civil war, that's the Indians killing each other, that reduced considerably, and the Indian population grew at a rate that it hitherto had never grown at in percentage and absolute terms, because the British brought a certain peace so that the Indians weren't killing each other to anywhere near the extent that they had been, and there weren't disruptive wars and constant to and fro dramas, which meant that the people, whether it be the peasants or the farmers or whatever, were able to make a much better living with the British there, and that because their trade or their farming wasn't being disrupted all the time by these petty wars and marauding bands of goons just taking what they wanted. So it was a net benefit to India in terms of the calm and the peace that it brought. Not that the Indian activists will recognise that or acknowledge in any way today, but it's the same in Africa, where the constant warfare of the African tribes and a petty warfare, raids, all sorts of honour killings. The list went on. These things the British put a stop to most of that, or the colonising powers, because when you've got civil war and warfare, it disrupts trade, it causes unnecessary uncertainty and so on. So it's just in no one's interest to do that, including the interest of the local population, by the way. So an advanced technical society will have a large proportion of urban inhabitants. Once you have the urban living, the bigger towns and cities and so on, then you have systems and procedures and organisational processes and so on that go along with the technical advancement. So this comes along with the colonisers. Now, in terms of I'll use the British colonising as probably the prime example, given they had the biggest empire. The British developed long, as the Portuguese and Spanish did, but the British developed the long ocean-going vessels, and they, being an island nation, they were very much into trade and commerce by ships, which gave them, I suppose, a bit of a head start in some of these trading pursuits. Also, the British had a number of views in terms of because for example, the American colonies or the islands around the Caribbean and so on, because they didn't offer immediate opportunities of gold and silver as South America did to the Spanish and the Portuguese, then they were looking at other ways to how can we make money out of this. So is the land arable? Well, it is. Okay, well, let's grow some crops there. Now, the European and particularly the British view on things is that land and raw materials, resources, should go to those who can best use those resources for the greatest, widest benefit. And it doesn't mean that the owner of the plantation or the farm or whatever wouldn't have made money, or the mine wouldn't have made money, or even become rich. They would have. But the idea was the maximum utility for the maximum number of people, and that the resources should not go unused, and the resources should go to the best use or the most effective use available. Now, so the British knew how to grow crops and large farms. They knew how to crossbreed animals to get better quality of wool from sheep, for example, or more milk from cows and these sort of things. they also understood. They also had advanced technology of shipbuilding and the like, but also things like irrigation and smelting of metals, iron ore is a case in point. The mining technology, they had the technology of pumps to be able to pump water out of mine shafts and the whole endless pieces of technology and how to rotate crops to keep the land arable and fertile and all sorts of things like that. So the British were looking at, and I'll use North America as a case in point, where they didn't immediately find gold or something. So they would look at, well, can we grow crops and can we build can we do farms? What about tobacco? And can we do, this is a good climate for cotton, and so on and so forth. So these were the type of things that the British were using. So they were investing in the land and creating value rather than the more extractive attitudes that the Spanish and the Portuguese adopted with, again, the silver and the gold out of South America. Not that the Spanish didn't do get into farming. Probably a little bit later on. Argentina, as an example, was quite well known for large beef cattle herds. Anyway, coming back to the view of the use of resources. So the European colonizers, again, particularly the British, but the French or Dutch as well, the British would come along and say, well, gee, look at all this land, no one's using it. In Australia, they could travel for days and not see a single local inhabitant. And here was all this excellent farming land that was available that wasn't being used. There was no farms, or there was no, they weren't running. These were Stone Age hunter-gatherers, so they weren't doing anything like having farms or having mines or making iron ore or anything like that. There was nothing like that at all. These were an early Stone Age people, not even advanced Stone Age people. So the British saw all these resources here. The colonists saw all these resources that were being unused. The land was unused. The raw materials were unused, wasn't being touched. Now, the Indigenous Australian activists today make, colonisers, evil, fascist, Nazi, they go all through that. But you say to them, all right, then, well, all the benefits of colonisation, you're not allowed to walk along a road, you can't live in a building with a roof, you can't use your mobile phone, you can't use the internet. Not a single white invention, not a single white piece of technology you are allowed to use. If you get sick and there's a pill or a tablet that can fix you, or a surgical operation, you can't use that because it's from those damn fucking Nazi, fascist, fucking white colonists. So if you want to disavow all that and say it's all bad, then it's all bad. Fine, don't use it. No, I want to say it's bad, but have all the advantages and benefits of using it and having it here to use. Can you have it both ways like that? Oh, I don't know. So this idea of the use of the maximum use of resources, or the best use of resources, was very much and it was considered almost as being sinful in a way to have vast areas of farming land that were unused, or mountains of iron ore that weren't iron ore that weren't being turned into iron. So these sorts of things, these sorts of attitudes. And having the scientific ability or technical ability to do something about this and to use them and to mobilise the resources necessarily to have the seeds to plant, to bring the cattle or the sheep out to graze, or to whatever the case may be, the machinery and equipment to dig the irrigation canals, and the list goes on. So when the British went to North America, they went to a place where this sort of technology didn't exist, where some Indian tribes did do like squash and corn. They did plant some crops, but they still moved around a lot seasonally and were still in a crossover to hunter-gatherer and into minor agricultural pursuits. So and very few had permanent settlements, although some did. Now, this meant that when the colonists arrived, the land, as far as they were concerned, was unused, and all the resources there were pretty much unused. So they thought, okay, well, if it's not being used, we might as well use it. And the same occurred in Africa. The area around what's today Zimbabwe used to be Rhodesia, or whether it be even South Africa or Kenya or any of these places. There's vast areas of good quality land that weren't being used. There were no farms there. There was nothing being grown there. Vast amounts of raw materials again weren't being used. When the Dutch first arrived in South Africa, this was like in the Cape Town. There was only hunter-gatherer bush tribesmen that were in the area, and small numbers. That area wasn't like it was populated by millions of Nelson Mandelas or something. That wasn't the case. Nobody there, and the Dutch built a very viable agricultural community there initially. I think it was around 1650 they started. Which was became quite prosperous because it was used by the Dutch traders and other traders, incidentally, to re-victual their ships as they were making the journey from Europe to Asia, China and Indonesia, India, and so on. So this became, these guys did a very good trade, very good business in not simply providing food and so on, but in things like ship repairs, providing sails, food and salted meats, water, and so on. So the Europeans there created an oasis out of nothing. The Stone Age hunter-gatherer bush tribesmen in that area, and because they were hunter-gatherers, they were sparsely located. Again, there wasn't millions of them there. They weren't really particularly affected by that. Wasn't a particularly good area for them. There wasn't a lot of good wildlife and so on for the hunter-gatherers to chase. So that was unused land that the Dutch traders in this instance first took. So the Europeans were really going to areas where the land, the resources were not being used, and they applied their advanced technologies to the advanced technologies of the day, which included the long ocean-going vessels. They applied their technologies to turn that land into productive land, whether it be farming or something else. So that was really the colonization thing. Now, colonization is equated with today, in the propaganda sense, with white people invading and killing off this too is untrue. Now, there were, I suppose you get maybe caught up in the weeds in some of this. There are cases where in Australia, as an example, look where the white people killed and this happened both ways, by the way. The white people had killed some of the indigenous inhabitants. They try and make out today in the propaganda that the killings were just indiscriminate for no reason, just because they were the white people were all a bunch of bloodthirsty fascist Nazi Hitlers and da-da-da. So they try and gin it up into something like that. It's far more nuanced in reality. So when because again, you have to sort of keep in mind the Aboriginal tribes were hunter-gatherers. They would disappear from an area, go somewhere else. Then they would come back a few years later. Now, and there was no understanding of contract law. So the white people said, well, we want to buy this area here. This 100 acres or whatever, piece of land. And, what do you want for that? Now, the Aborigines were mesmerized by things like iron tools, which could be axes or shovels or knives or any of that sort of stuff. They were mesmerized by it. Wow. And remember, this is a technology that's thousands of years ahead of where they are. They're a Stone Age people. So they'll take a few of these axes and knives and think, we'll take that as payment for this land. Now, okay, well, that's it. We've got a contract now. Now, a few years later, the Aborigines would come back and, they're hunter-gatherers, they're moving around. They'd come back and they'd say, no, we didn't give you that land. We just let you use it while we didn't want it. But we're now back and we want it, so you guys can get lost. And by the way, those sheep or those cattle that you're running, they're scaring away the kangaroos, and we normally eat the kangaroos. So what we're going to do is, because you scared away the kangaroos, we're going to kill and eat some of your cattle or some of your sheep, which, by the way, are good eating. So we're happy about that. So they would do that, and the farmers say, no, you can't kill our herds. We put a lot of time and energy and effort into keeping those herds. So no, you can't, because it's indiscriminately kill our animals, the white farmers would say. And the Aborigines say, well, we're not accountable to your law. We can do what the fuck we want. So, and by the way, why don't you fuck off anyway? So the killing would continue. So the white farmers would you typically go through the local sheriffs and things like that and say, hey, these guys are. So then they would organise a posse. They would go out to the Aboriginal tribe or the section of the tribe and say, okay, we want who killed the sheep, and we want to take them. And sometimes the penalty for, say, cattle rustling or cattle stealing was hanging. So the Aborigines say, no, we're not accountable to your law. Well, yes, as soon as you steal our sheep or cattle, yes, you are. Then and that would turn, as you can imagine, that would turn unpleasant. Now the white people say, well, we did a contract with you. We gave you the iron axes and the whatever. So we own this now. It's ours, and that's it. That's how it is. And without an understanding of contract, they say, no, it's not yours. It's we can take it whenever we want. And by the way, if another Aboriginal tribe is on land we want, we just kill them and steal their stuff. So don't think we're going to treat you any, and so on. So you can see how it would be. Now the idea that you could turn that into a racist thing and go, it was Hitler. That's absolute utter nonsense. It was nothing of the sort. So the conflict would occur, and that today is now used. See the Nazis, look what they did. And it's not that. It's very, very different. Now, when you're a farmer out in an exposed area with no soldiers or things to protect you, you don't want to antagonize the local tribes or the local people. You don't want to do it. The last thing you want is to be on bad terms. You don't want them turning up in the middle of the night and trying to kill you. When you're out working in the fields, you don't want them turning up and killing your wife and kids. So you don't want to get on their bad side if you can avoid it. And that needs to be considered and put in perspective. This idea of trying to represent white people as fire-breathing Nazis who are running around trying to kill everything in sight and so on is just utter and total bullshit. Now on the reverse side, the local, the Aborigines were more than happy to take whatever the white people were giving, but were equally so. You have to give us now 100 axes a day in perpetuity. So that they weren't averse to trying to strike one-way bargains and deals themselves, which would, then the allegation of acting in bad faith would come up and these sorts of things. There are other factors too, like the proselytizing nature of the Christian missionaries, and that they were saving souls by converting these people to Christianity. I'm not so. I do understand the point and understand the basis that for more peaceful coexistence and for all Christians it'll help. I get that. Whether or not it was a wonderful thing, I don't know. But what did happen was white man's diseases, or again, any people who'd arrived. It didn't matter. Wherever they would have come from, they would have brought diseases with them. It just happened to be white diseases because the white people had the technology. So the white people are really being held to an interesting standard here because you are the most advanced technological people in the world, which white people were. Then that makes you uniquely bad and evil, and everything you did is therefore uniquely bad and evil. That is a ridiculous argument, absolutely ridiculous. Similarly, the same thing is that all these native peoples, whether they be North American Indians or Aborigines, were living in some form of utopian paradise where nothing went wrong. They lived forever, and land, milk and honey just poured throughout their society, and that they were this cohesive, loving, kumbaya nation state. All this is nonsense, absolute nonsense. The whole population of Australia was around 1 million people. Less than, say, a mid-sized city is today. And this is when white men turned up. And so this idea of that it was a nation state with everyone with a common language, there were 1 million people, and there was something like I don't know. I don't know if anyone actually knows, but somewhere between 250 and 300 separate tribes, and then sub-tribes off that in Australia. So we're looking at fairly small numbers of tribes located all around the place, and with vast areas of land to roam around in. And the early explorers could travel for days. White explorers could travel days, and whether it be in North America or Australia or even parts of Africa, could travel for days and not see a single person. So that gives you an idea of how sparsely populated the place was. So they weren't nation states, they weren't homogenous, they didn't have a homogenous language, and they weren't living peacefully and harmoniously. Far from it. None of those things are true. In the case of India, they were what the Europeans perceived to be. They were already a failed state, with a couple of patches of places not doing too bad, but the rest were really in a state of permanent decay and civil war when the Europeans arrived. The same could be said for the Indians in North America and Canada. So these are perspectives, but we don't see these nuanced and balanced perspectives at all. We see quite the opposite. And it's a simple thing. This is not complicated, everybody. White man bad. White man bad. Brown, black, good. That's the only takeaway in it, and which of course is absurd and ridiculous. But it's one that's being aggressively pushed by the globalists for the reasons I mentioned at the opening. It's been fantastic to start your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.